Hey class, I hope you guys have been enjoying reading Morte D'Arthur as much as I have. I'm kind of reminded a little bit of 1001 Arabian Nights as we're working through this text with random things just kind of happening and surprising unexpected events and fights that are seemingly unmotivated. There's a lot of similarities to that text that we read earlier this year, and I hope you're finding this fun as well as uh, interesting and informative into literature in the medieval times. So I wanted to take a little bit of time today to just talk about one of the major textual motifs that we see in Le Morte D'Arthur, which is the quest. So we're going to talk a little bit about the medieval quest today and what were some of the defining characteristics of it, where did it come from, what was its kind of purpose in the literary world and in the world of the story as we read it. And then I'm going to ask you to think about where you've seen quests so far in Le Morte D'Arthur. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where the quest kind of goes as it develops in literature. And moves forward throughout the medieval era. And we may encounter a few other examples of the quest that are very different as we look at a couple things outside of Le Morte D'Arthur. As we usually do, we look at some texts outside of our main text, and we may look a little bit at that and see how the quest is shaped a little bit differently as we get towards the end of the medieval era and the quest narrative has developed. So let's get started talking about the motif of the medieval quest. So the quest is originally a Celtic idea. It's actually doesn't originate with the Christian population of the medieval era. It actually originates with the Celtic population. The Celts were the group that lived in England prior to the Germanic tribes invading England. And as I mentioned a particular group of Celts, the Bretons, who traveled across from England to the north of France in Brittany. And so the Celts are an English people, and they were the people responsible for the stories of King Arthur. So it's no wonder that the quest and the story of King Arthur are so interwoven together, because both the quest narrative and the stories of King Arthur originally come from the Celts. And so this is a very kind of Celtic traditional narrative, and so it's very much kind of a part of the Arthur story. So the quest originally comes from something that Celts actually did in real life. Of course, it changes and evolves over time and takes on something completely different in literature than it was historically speaking, but it does come from an actual historical thing that happened on a number of occasions. So the Celts often would have their bravest leaders leave the tribe to go find a new home for their people. And this happened under a number of circumstances. Perhaps there was a famine, and so the survival of the tribe was being threatened by lack of food. Perhaps they were being threatened by a neighboring tribe, was threatening to go to war with them, and they didn't feel that they were able to stand up to them. The Celts were a warrior people, and they were very fearsome in battle, but sometimes you just knew you were outmatched and outnumbered. And so sometimes the Celts would feel the need to move. They were a migratory people. They migrated a great deal, and so sometimes they felt the need to move from one area to another. And so they would send out a single brave warrior to go hunt for a new home, and then he would come back and say, I found a new home, and they would all pack up and leave and move to a new place. So this was kind of the original idea of the quest. And there are some elements of that that survive in the medieval quest narrative, the idea of a brave warrior, a knight, being sent out from the community, being sent out from Camelot, sent out from the court, and going on the quest and then coming back, right, returning. Now, the quest in the medieval era is not usually a quest to move, to leave home and settle in a new area. It's usually a quest to fulfill some specific purpose, or to just search for adventure, or to find someone or something, or to prove your worth. There were other reasons for the quest in medieval literature, not moving to a new home, but there are some similarities in the basic structure of the quest that remain. So we're going to look specifically at the medieval quest as it appears in medieval literature, because that's really what we primarily know the idea of the quest from, is medieval literature. It's one of kind of the great contributions of the medieval era to the realm of literature, is this idea of the quest. And we have seen heroes on adventures before, and we have seen them on quests before, but we really interpret those older ideas of the quest through what we come to know as the quest in the medieval era. We may not have called it a quest or really quite had a name for, say, Gilgamesh's journey and his search for immortality. We might not have had a name for that had we not become familiar with the quest and that idea in the medieval era. So, the medieval quest is simply defined as the pursuit of something or someone of special importance. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with the word pursuit. The medieval quest was the pursuit of something or someone of special importance. There's a lot involved in that word pursuit, certainly a journey, right? And so there's very much the idea of a journey, as well as experiencing a series of adventures on that journey. And hopefully you've read enough of Morte D'Arthur by now to recognize that this is true. The knight goes on a journey and they experience a series of adventures. There's kind of a progression of things that happen to them. They also undergo a number of trials, so they face a number of different challenges on the quest, and hopefully you've seen that this is true as well. These trials involved journeying far or voyaging far, whether that's by sea or just riding on horse, but you journey quite some distance. You leave Camelot, you leave the home base, and you journey for a long ways. They encounter difficulties, right? There are lots of kind of obstacles that are put up in their path to keep them from achieving their quest. They maybe face monsters, some sort of beast, or they have to challenge evil men, or any other number of things. Eventually, the idea is the knight would vanquish all challenges and then return back to Camelot or back to the home base with a sense of fulfillment and having accomplished something. Now, the other half of this definition is that the medieval quest was the pursuit of something or someone of special importance. This could be either a spiritual or a personal significance. It could be something as basically personally significant as adventure. We see in Morte D'Arthur that some knights set off on a quest simply seeking adventure because perhaps they've been offended by something at home. They don't like what happened, and so they just kind of set off and they're like, I'm in quest for adventure, and through adventure for honor and glory and fame, right? And that could be the personal significance, or it could be an actual person that is personally significant to them. Maybe they're trying to go rescue somebody. It could also be something of personal significance because it's important to their lord. So we see one quest in Morte D'Arthur where 3 knights are sent out because there's this random thing that happens in court, and Merlin tells Arthur, unless you take care of this, your marriage will not be blessed, right? Because the white stag and the white dog and the woman on the white horse and the knight all arrive on Arthur and Guinevere's wedding day. And Merlin says, you've got to take care of this. You've got to get your knights to take care of these various quests, or else it's a bad omen for your marriage. And so it becomes important to the knights because it's important to the king, right? So it's personal significance there. Later, as the quest continues to develop, though, the quest begins to take on a more spiritual significance many times. And as we get to later parts of Le Morte D'Arthur and encounter the quest for the Holy Grail, this becomes a quest of spiritual significance. And in order to complete that quest, you have to be spiritually pure and mature, right? You have to demonstrate that you are spiritually worthy of that quest. The quest then, even beyond the realm of Arthurian literature, but the idea of the quest moves beyond that in the medieval era and takes on an even more spiritual significance sometimes, where the quest is entirely spiritual. It's not really a physical quest. And this is the case I mentioned in an earlier lecture. Dante's Divine Comedy is another significant work of the medieval era. And that is the case with Dante's Divine Comedy. It is a quest story, but it's a spiritual quest story. It's all about a person's spiritual journey and not really about a physical journey at all. So the quest could take on a number of different directions, but it always has some sort of spiritual or personal significance for the knight or warrior or person who is going on the quest. So the effect of the quest, kind of in the literary world, and especially in Le Morte D'Arthur, is kind of that it proves the worth of a knight. It proves that they're worthy to become a knight. And so every worthy knight has to undertake a difficult quest. And we see this as kind of a motif very early on in Le Morte D'Arthur. In this first section that you're reading, you'll see that several knights are sent on a quest in order to prove their worth to King Arthur. They're young, they're inexperienced, and so they have to go on a quest. And so through the quest, the knight becomes more mature, right? They become really a man in the eyes of the court. They become an adult member of society. And this proves their worth in the eyes of the court. They are worthy and valuable as knights, and they are allowed to serve kind of as fully fledged knights because they have completed a quest. This happens in particular with Sir Torre and Sir Gawain early on in Le Morte D'Arthur. When they're first knighted, they are sent out by Arthur, and when they come back, they have proven themselves to be worthy knights. There's kind of a pattern of growth of the knight as they go on the quest. It's not always seen exactly this way, but it is a typical pattern that you kind of tend to see in the knight's journey on the quest and how they undergo character growth through the quest. So this is the pattern that you see throughout quest narratives. The knight usually starts out as young, immature, and overconfident. And then oftentimes they face some sort of insurmountable problem, something that they can't overcome on their own. They're not good enough and not heroic enough to be able to conquer it by themselves. So they actually have to admit defeat and recognize their own weaknesses in order to move forward. When they call for help from others, they then receive aid from others, and they receive also some sort of enlightenment, some sort of knowledge about themselves, some sort of knowledge about the way that the world is supposed to work. They learn a valuable lesson. They're changed and become a better person for their quest. Now, this is a very, very different idea from some of the heroic narratives that we've seen in the past, say with Odysseus or Aeneas or Achilles, right? There may be a small semblance of growth with those characters, but the focus is really not character growth. And they're really presented to be kind of the perfect hero, right? The ancient Greek and Roman perspective of the hero was that they were almost a god, right? And so they didn't really need to grow and change because they were so good already. But the medieval era takes a much, much more human approach to the hero. The hero is a knight, and if Le Morte D'Arthur proves nothing else, it proves that humans are fallible. The knights are constantly doing things that were like, why are you doing this? This is not a good choice. This is not a good decision. And I don't know that Mallory is necessarily saying it's a good decision, right? He's kind of reporting that humans are broken and fallible and they don't do the right thing, right? And so the knights, in that same way, are not always able to overcome their challenges on their own strength. They're not the ancient Greek and Roman hero through the sheer force of their will that can accomplish whatever they set out to do. They are average human beings and they need help. And they have to recognize that help, recognize that need for help and accept the help in order to accomplish what they set out to accomplish. And so the medieval era has a very clear perspective of what it means to be human, that human beings are fallible. Now, Mallory, even though he reports on a lot of fallible knights who do a lot of things that they shouldn't have done and made mistakes, he almost always has serious consequences for those mistakes. And he also holds a pretty uncompromising standard. None of those knights who have done those things they shouldn't have done are able to find the Holy Grail. It's Sir Galahad who is pure and who has kind of foregone all earthly pleasures, who's able to see the Holy Grail. Now, in reality, I don't think we have to be perfect in order for God to accept us. Obviously, that's not biblical. But I think there's kind of perhaps a little bit of an allegorical lesson going on there, right? A more symbolic lesson. And the fact is that we could learn from Morte D'Arthur that sin has consequences. And that's definitely a very real reality in this book. The knights make mistakes. They do things they shouldn't do, and they have to deal with the consequences of that. They don't just get to have a consequence-less life. And so many of them set out on the quest for the Holy Grail, but the natural consequence of their decisions is they can't achieve it, and Galahad can. And so one of the primary lessons of Morte D'Arthur is that sin comes with consequences. But that all ties into this idea of the quest, right? The knights go on a quest, they make mistakes, they fail, they face insurmountable problems, and they have to get help from the outside in order to achieve the quest in the end. And they grow and they learn lessons and they're humbled through all of that. I think of Sir Pellinore learning that he should have helped the woman because he finds out that she killed herself, right? And he could have done something to save her, but he was too busy, right? What a poignant lesson, right? He should have stopped to help. He was too busy going on his quest that he missed one of the valuable lessons he could have learned on the quest, and he learns it the hard way. So there's a lot to be learned from this, and it's actually, I think, this perspective of the quest is somewhat grounded in the Christian faith because it's important for us to recognize we can't conquer the problem of sin on our own. We have to ask for help from the outside, from Christ. And I think this aspect of the quest, though the quest was originally a Celtic thing, it becomes kind of a Christian thing as the knight takes on this pattern of learning that they must accept help from the outside in order to achieve what they've set out to achieve. All right, guys, so hopefully you feel like you learned something about the quest in medieval literature today, and how it impacts the character development in the story and a lot of other things. And I hope you're also beginning to make some connections between what you've learned here and what you've read so far in Morte D'Arthur. So below this video, you're going to find a question that's going to ask you about those connections that you're making. So make sure to respond to that, and then make sure once others have posted that you come back and comment on their posts. And if you have any questions, contact me. Have a great day, guys.